So today, March 25th, 2026. Yesterday we were discussing about the role of mindfulness in dispelling unwholesome dhammas, defilements, hindrances, so that the mind is liberated from the defilements, vimutta citta. We will have that liberated mind. And when we do have that liberated mind, we again need to be mindful of that liberated mind. When kilesa, defilements, arise in the mind, that mind is not liberated mind, avimutta citta. When we do have that mind, we need to be mindful of that avimutta citta. And so in dispelling or eradicating those defilements, the mindfulness plays a vital role. Mindfulness keeps the mind away from defilements. But when we lose mindfulness, when we forget, then kilesa, defilements will arise very easily in our mind. So, satiya patigananto, just having hold on this mindfulness, we will be able to conquer all kinds of inferior, unskillful dhammas, all kinds of defilements, hindrances. And at the each noting of the objects occurring in the six sense doors, we dispel those hindrances momentarily, so our mind is liberated from hindrances in momentary basis, momentary liberation. And when we keep on observing the objects continuously with aiming and effort, we will be able to develop insight, knowledge, and in certain knowledge, we will be able to keep our mind away from those hindrances. Our mind will be free from those hindrances for a long time. So that type of liberation is Vikambana liberation, long-lasting liberation. Vikambana vimutti, long-lasting liberation. So therefore here it is all about mindfulness. This mindfulness, as we are doing this Satipatthana mindfulness meditation, we just need to try hard to develop this mindfulness all the time. In order to stop the current of defilements. One time, Ajita, a man, Ajita, he asked Buddha, he told Buddha that, Venerable Sir, there are a current of defilements flowing within us. There are current of defilements flowing in all bases. The basis here means um, mind and matter. In eye base, eye sensitivity, the visible forms strikes on eye base, and this eye base is also the base. Visible form is also base, and then the seeing consciousness occurs, that is also base. So in all bases, the kilesa, the defilements, the current of defilements is flowing. So what can prevent this current of defilements? What can prevent this current of defilements? How can one protect oneself from this current of defilements? And how or which dhamma can stop this current of defilements from flowing in all bases, all sense bases, or in how can one stop completely this current of defilements? Which Dhamma is helpful in eradicating, in stopping these defilements, which is flowing like a current of river. And then the Buddha replied to him that Sati Tesang Nivarana. The short answer, Sati Tesang Nivarana. Mindfulness is the Dhamma that can prevent the current of defilements in all 6 sense doors. So if we do not have this mindfulness, then every time we see, we hear, we smell, taste, touch, think, then these defilements can arise. So in order to stop this, in order to prevent these defilements from flowing in these 6 sense doors, we need to cultivate sati, mindfulness. And this mindfulness can protect samvara. This mindfulness can protect our mind. And by developing this mindfulness continuously, we will be able to develop wisdom, insight, and that insight will stop this current of defilements completely. So here mindfulness, this mindfulness is the mindfulness we develop in Vipassanā practice, Vipassanā mindfulness. When we do Satipatthana Vipassanā practice, we cultivate mindfulness, that mindfulness. Vipassanā mindfulness will prevent the current of defilements. And when mindfulness gets stronger, concentration develops, and when the mind is concentrated, then we will be able to see the very true natures of all these physical and mental phenomena occurring in 6 sense doors very clearly. We develop insight knowledge stage by stage, and when insight knowledge get matured, we attain path knowledge. So that path knowledge will stop the defilements completely. That's how the Buddha replied to a man, Ajita. So this mindfulness is very vital factor in our life, whether we are in our we are in this meditation center or whether we are staying in our home, in worldly life and in spiritual life, everywhere we need this mindfulness. That's what the Buddha mean. So if we are if we forget, if we are forgetful, then these defilements will get a chance to enter into our mind. So we need to develop this mindfulness so that it becomes stronger and stronger, and we will be able to prevent and eradicate the defilements. And how can we develop this mindfulness? How can we have that strong mindfulness which can prevent and eradicate the defilements? What is the cause to what is the cause for this mindfulness to arise? The cause for mindfulness to arise is, according to the text, it is the Tira Sanya. Tira Sanya means form perception, the form recognition of the objects occurring. So having form perception of the every arising objects, that means whatever the object is, we just need to um, record that object. Means we just need to note that object, and continuous noting helps this mindfulness to take place, and it becomes stronger and stronger. So mindfulness itself is also the cause to develop stronger mindfulness. That means every time when we try to observe the objects, we cultivate mindfulness. If we are able to note the object for one moment, then there will be one mindfulness. If we are able to note the object for two moments, then there will be two mindfulness. And this mindfulness, if we keep on noting the objects, then this mindfulness will be multiplied and it becomes stronger and powerful. So the earlier noting, earlier mindfulness is very supportive to the latter mindfulness. So that's how we have to develop mindfulness. Therefore, Thira Sanya Padatthana, recognition of the objects, the perception of the objects, and that should be very Thira, firm and strong, and that helps to cultivate the stronger mindfulness. Therefore, here again, this is the matter of continuous noting. If we just note, if we note just for a one moment, and we are forgetful for a long period of time, then we will not be able to develop strong mindfulness. So here, continuous noting, continuous observation is necessary to develop that type of mindfulness. And when we are able to develop mindfulness that way, we are observing the objects constantly, one after another, then we come to understand, we come to discern the nature, the characteristics of mindfulness. What nature does the mindfulness have? We come to know. So we always say mindfulness, yes, mindfulness, but what nature this mindfulness has? In Pali, apilapana lakkhana. Apilapana lakkhana, the meaning is uh, not floating on the surface of the object. That is the characteristic of mindfulness. The nature of mindfulness is not floating on the surface of the object. So that means the mindfulness has the nature of sinking into the object, penetration, sinking into the object. That is the nature of mindfulness. Of course, at the very beginning, we will not have this type of, we will not understand this nature of mindfulness because it is still very weak and it is not continuous. But when we keep on observing the objects one after another with aiming and effort, we develop one mindfulness after another, and when it becomes strong, then we come to understand this nature. That the mind, we in the when we do when we are noting the objects, for example, rising and falling movement in the abdomen, sometimes we may experience that the noting mind not just touching the object on the surface, but it seems that it sinks inside the object. We can experience that. This becomes very clear. So that nature. Therefore, mindfulness is compared with a rock. When we throw a rock in the water, it sinks in the water. It will not float on the surface. But when we throw a piece of paper in the water, that paper just floats on the surface. It will not sink into the water. So we should have that type of mindfulness as a rock sinks into the water. The mindfulness also penetrates the object of observation. Whatever object we are noting, sometimes we we experience the mind, just going inside the objects. It is penetrating the object. So that is the nature of characteristic of this mindfulness. And the another nature of mindfulness is asammosa rasa, that is the function of mindfulness. That means not to forget, not forgetting the object. Whatever objects is there, whatever object is there, we will be able to note one after another. One after another, we will be able to note. We don't miss the objects. At the beginning, we miss many objects. We miss many objects, but when we keep on trying, keep on observing, keep on noting the objects respectfully and continuously, we will be able to note more and more objects. There might be that we still may miss, may forget many objects, but it will be different than before because now we can note more objects than before. So we are not very forgetful like at the beginning. We are now more mindful. But still we miss some because um, this type of very strong mindfulness we can gain only in the higher knowledges, in the path and fruition knowledge, but at the beginning and when the insight knowledge has not developed yet, we still forget many objects, but when we keep on practicing, we can aware of more objects than before. So we lose only few objects. And sometimes we also notice when we lose objects, when we forget to note objects, we notice that, oh, I forget to note, I forget that object. So we come to know that way. So that is asammosa rasa, that is the function of mindfulness. And again, um, when mindfulness becomes stronger, we will not lose the sight of the objects. So we are aware of the objects continuously. We will not lose the sight of that object. So the example, like when um, a footballer playing the football, his eye will always be on the football. His sight will always be on the football. He keeps his attention always on the ball when he plays football. So too, when our mindfulness gets stronger, we do not lose the sight of objects. We can follow the objects to the end. We can follow that object to the end. As long as the object is obvious, as long as the object is there, we can follow it very closely. Sometimes we might feel that the noting mind sticks to the object. The noting mind and the object are so close, going together, but still two different Dhamma. Noting mind, this is mentality, and the object, sometimes, for example, if we are noting rising movement, when our mindfulness is very good, the noting mind can follow that rising movement from the very beginning to the end very closely. But two objects, two different things, the mind and the movement, the rising movement, mentality and physicality, but they are too close, very close. It seems that the noting mind sticks to the movement of rising. So that type of function is the mindfulness has. That is the function of mindfulness. In the practice, we can experience that. And when we say this, the asammosa rasa, not to forget the objects, that there are many objects arising. If we do not pay attention, if we are not mindful, we will not see those objects arising one after another because most of the time the mind wanders. But when we develop mindfulness, we come to see that, oh, the objects arising one after another while noting rising and falling movement very precisely, very meticulously, we might experience, oh, itchiness. And we note that itchiness, there might arise another object, movement, like ants crawling. So we notice objects one after another very clearly. If we do not have mindfulness, we won't be able to see, able to notice those objects. But now we can. We can see the objects very clearly. So pain and other sensations arising in other parts of the body, we will be able to uh, note them. That is the function of mindfulness. And when we keep on observing this noting of the object, what we feel that as a yogi, we come to realize, we come to know that our noting mind is facing towards the object. The noting mind facing towards the object, the mind and the object, they become face to face. And we see that object very clearly because the mind and the object are face to face. We see that object very clearly. But before, when the mindfulness is not strong, we won't see the object clearly. We think we see the object, but it is not clear, blur, sometimes cloudy. But when the mindfulness gets stronger and stronger, we come to see that object very clearly. So that is the manifestation of mindfulness. The mind is directed towards the object, and this nature, this quality of mindfulness is manifested to the people who are, to the yogis who are practicing very respectfully, very diligently, very precisely. So then we also experience that our mind is very secured. Our mind is protected. We feel that, we experience that. And that is also the manifestation of mindfulness. So this mindfulness protects the mind. The mind and the object are face to face, and we come to know the nature of the mind, means at that time there is no other defilements. There is no other defilements. Only the mind and the object, the noting mind and the noted objects. And the noting mind knows the objects very clearly, so no defilements are arising at that moment, and we feel that, oh, our mind is very pure, very clean, and very secure. The mind is protected from all sorts of kilesas, which can enter from the sixth sense doors. So if we are able to note that way, then we see that our mind is very calm also. Because of the power of this mindfulness, there is no wanderings, no thoughts, no imaginations. And by chance, if any thoughts, any imaginations, any defilements arise, we will be able to note it immediately. The defilements, the thoughts, the imaginations, they will not arise for a long time because we can catch them very quickly. And sometimes when the protection is good, strong. The mindfulness is protecting the mind. And when this protection is very strong, very powerful, we can even see that we can even stop the defilements before it arises. Means we can notice that now the thought is about to arise. It has not arisen yet, but it is about to come. The thoughts or the imaginations, it is about to enter into the mind. But because of the protection of mindfulness, we can prevent them before they enter. That is the manifestation of mindfulness. Araka, the mind is protected. The mind is protected from the defilements. So when the mind is protected from the defilements, then we feel very secured. The mental security is there. We feel very secured. So, therefore, in order to have that kind of mindfulness, we just need to try our best to observe the objects arising in the present moment. We just try to note whatever the object arising at that very moment with full effort and aiming, whether the object is desirable or undesirable, whether the object is wholesome object or unwholesome object. We just need to note them. So to have that type of strong mindfulness, we also need to have a wise attention. Just now we were talking about the different natures of mindfulness, different characteristics, different natures of this mindfulness. At the beginning of the practice, we won't be able to experience this nature of mindfulness, of course, because we do not have that type of mindfulness. We are not able to note the objects continuously. So at the beginning of the practice, we will not experience that type of natures of the mindfulness. When we keep on observing and when we gain the knowledge, the insight of arising and vanishing, then this sati, mindfulness, it becomes an enlightenment factor, and at that time we can experience, we can see, we can understand this nature of mindfulness very clearly. And before that insight of arising and vanishing, there are other three knowledge, the insight on the mind and matter, seeing the mind and matter, distinguishing the mind and matter. There is another insight, the insight on the cause and effect relation of these mind and matter, and also the insight on contemplating the three characteristics of phenomena. In these three, at this stage of insight, that time also we can experience this mindfulness, but not clearly. But when we gain the insight, arising and vanishing, then this mindfulness, it becomes an enlightenment factor of the path. So at that time, this nature becomes very, very clear to us. We feel that, oh, I can note everything. I can note everything. I did not miss anything. I can note every single object. We feel like that. So that mindfulness is the firmly established mindfulness. Upathita sati, very firmly established mindfulness. So as long as we have that type of mindfulness, we will be able to dispel these defilements. We will be able to dispel these defilements. Therefore, we just need to have a wise attention to gain, to develop that type of strong mindfulness, wise attention to arise mindfulness. So, wise attention means um, the intention to arise mindfulness. I will let mindfulness to arise. I will try my best so that the mindfulness takes place. So that type of intention, the wise attention, yoniso manasikara, we should have. Yeah, sometimes though we have that wise attention, we have a resolution, I will try my best to uh, to arise this mindfulness all the time. Sometimes we won't be able to do so. Sometimes the mindfulness will not be there. It may be very weak, but other time we will be able to do that. But we have to try again and again to arise that type of mindfulness. So the commentators explain about the four causes, not only this wise attention. In Pali, the Buddha shows only one uh, condition for the mindfulness to arise, wise attention, yoniso manasikara, the intention to arise mindfulness. But the commentators give mentioned another four causes is trying to be mindful at all activities, trying to be mindful at all activities means try to be mindful all the time. And also having a resolution to arouse mindfulness and avoiding the forgetful people, avoiding, not associating with the forgetful people, and associating with the mindful people. So avoiding the forgetful people and associating the mindful people is also a very um, good condition to arise mindfulness. Looking on how this yogi doing in his practice, oh, he was so mindful, she was so mindful, noting very respectfully, very continuously, very precisely, I will also do. I will also try my best to practice respectfully and precisely. We can gain some inspiration from them. Therefore, avoiding forgetful people is also necessary, and associating with the mindful, diligent fellow yogis is also very helpful in developing mindfulness. Associating doesn't mean that we associate with them, talking, discussing, but copying them. We try to imitate, try to copy, try to get lesson from them. So that way um, we can develop the strong mindfulness that becomes the enlightenment factor in the practice. But still, we may not have a very strong, very firm mindfulness. This enlightenment factor of mindfulness is fully developed only when one attains the the fourth part and fruition knowledge, only when one attains the arhatship. But at the beginning, we can try, and we have to try, we should try, because unless we develop this type of strong mindfulness, we won't be able to develop strong concentration. And if we couldn't develop strong concentration, then we won't be able to see the mental and physical phenomena exactly as it is. So in the Satipatthana Sutta, Satima, be mindful. Be mindful. So we have to be mindful. And when we are mindful, this mindfulness helps to develop concentration. So concentration is samadhi in Pali. Samadhi, concentration. This is one of the mental factor. And this samadhi, it can keeps the mind on the object calm, tranquil. It can keep the mind on the object of observation very calm, very steady. So when concentration, samadhi, is developed, the mind will not scatter. The mind will not be distracted. So samadhi is non-distraction. This concentration does not let the mind scattered or distracted. And another definition of concentration, samadhi, is samadhi concentration places the mind in the object evenly. So when there is concentration, the mind just fixed on the object, just stays on the object. The mind becomes very steady, very calm, very still. So that is samadhi. And samadhi is, there is another word used to describe this samadhi. In Pali, it is chitte kagata, one-pointedness of the mind. So one-pointedness of the mind means the mind stays on the object. The mind stays on the object. The mind itself does not scatter, or the mind itself is not scattered, and it keeps other mental factors also calm and collected on the object. It keeps other associated mental factors, other dhammas, um, undistracted, unscattered. That is the nature of samadhi concentration. And when samadhi concentration is present, the mind becomes very calm, quiet, tranquil, not wavering. And as we said, in every noting of the object, mindfulness is present. So too samadhi concentration present. in every and each noting of the objects. If we are able to note the object for one moment, there is one moment of concentration. If we are able to note for 1 minute, there is concentration for 1 minute. So every moment when we are able to note the objects, then we will have this concentration for that period. So every time when there is mindfulness, there is concentration. And that concentration keeps the mind on that object observed very calmly and very steadily. So that type of samadhi we need to develop in the practice. But when we say samadhi concentration, we have to understand it in terms of Vipassana practice, because many of us would like to have very strong samadhi that can help our mind to keep quiet, to experience calmness. We feel very peaceful. We all are looking for that type of samadhi. We want to have this calmness of the mind. We want this peacefulness in the mind. If the mind is very still, very calm, then we feel very happy, very satisfied. But we need to understand about this samadhi more. So what kind of samadhi we gain when we practice this type of vipassana meditation? We need to understand that. There are different kinds of samadhi mentioned in the text. For example, access concentration, upachara samadhi, and absorption concentration, appana samadhi, and vipassana samadhi or khanika samadhi, that is momentary concentration, and magga samadhi, path concentration, phala samadhi, fruition concentration. There are many kinds of concentration mentioned in the text. And the first two, the upachara, access concentration, and appana, absorption concentration, these two concentration produced in tranquility meditation, in samatha practice. When we do samatha meditation, focusing our mind on one object, only one object. We just try to fix our mind on one object, and we develop that access concentration. And when access concentration becomes very strong and powerful, then there arises absorption concentration. The mind is absorbed in the object of samatha practice. The mind does not go here and there. The mind does not take other objects, just absorbed in one object only. If one is taking this in-breath and out-breath as the object of his samatha practice, the mind just fix on that object. And that type of strong concentration gain in tranquility meditation. But in vipassana practice, we have many objects, many mental and physical objects arising in six sense doors. So we cannot fix our mind in just one object. So the concentration developed in this vipassana practice is different from the concentration developed in samatha practice. And we will continue this talk tomorrow.